All right, good morning to everyone watching this. I do have one student here, but for some reason she seems to have a hard time hearing me. So I'm kind of talking to an empty room, but I'm kind of not. Okay, so I do apologize if anybody came here today because I was running late. I'm trying to see if she can hear me. I was running late because my darling 5-year-old son, who has gorgeous, gorgeous hair, especially for a boy, got homemade slime stuck in his hair, and I had to pick it out hair by hair. So I was a little late coming downstairs. So I apologize if anybody was here and left, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with today's class, and then I will tell you how you can participate in this class and get your attending class extra credit from the recording. So we're going to go through a comma review. When I graded all of your essays, I noticed that there were some comma issues, not for everyone, but for some people. So reviewing commas is always a good idea. I try to review them as often as I can. So that being said, what I would like you to do, so there's different sections in here where um, I'm going to give you an instruction on a comma rule, and then there will be examples. And what I would like you to do is kind of pay attention. What I want you to do in order to gain your credit for watching today's class, and you'll get 1 point per correct answer, and I'll put them anywhere you want me to put them, is pay attention to those examples. Kind of, you may need to pause the video to, write them down or type them down, and then correct them. What I want you to do is to put the comma in brackets where you think it needs to go. So I'm going to put it in the chat and hopefully you can see it. Bracket, parenthesis, bracket. Okay. This is what it looks like. A bracket is right below your backspace next to the slash. So you have a backspace, and then below that you have a backward slash, and then next to that on the left you have brackets. Okay, the bracket is the square one. Above that is called an ellipsis. So what I want you to do, where you think a comma needs to go in the sentences that are reviewing the comma rules that we will cover, type out the sentence, put a bracket, comma, bracket. And then when you have all of the sentences that are going to be in these examples, send me an email. I will grade it, and I'll let you know how many points you earned. Okay, so it's pretty easy. This is a presentation originally written by Mrs. Brumbelow, who is the main teacher for American Literature. I usually get the second section because she is a contracted full-time GAS teacher and I am not. But we like to work together a little bit, mostly me using the great resources she created. I say work together, but she's the one that does most of it because she's amazing. And she's been doing this a lot longer than I have. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of these are the general comma rules we're going to cover, and then we'll look at some of them a little bit more specifically. So when do I use commas? Use commas to separate independent clauses when they are joined by a coordinating conjunction. This is your first comma rule. Coordinating conjunctions can be memorized by memorizing the word fanboys, F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, F-A-N-B-O-R-Y-S, fanboys. So those are the coordinating conjunctions, and anytime you use one of those coordinating conjunctions, generally you should be using a comma. Now, the exception to that, you don't want to just look through a sentence and find every example of the time when you see the word and then put in a comma, because that's not necessarily going to be the case. Like, for example, if your favorite ice cream is cookies and cream, there's no comma necessary in that expression that goes with that particular and. So when I say, for example, I'm not putting a comma after the for. So those are coordinating conjunctions, yes, but they also have functions in other sentences that are not necessarily coordinating conjunctions. So you do need to use your brain and make sure you're identifying that these are actually connecting two pieces of a sentence and not just part of an expression. Okay. So for example, the game was over, but the crowd refused to leave. The expression, the section of the sentence, the game was over, is an independent clause. That's a completed sentence. The crowd refused to leave is another independent clause. We're squishing them together because they go together, they coordinate. We're putting a coordinating conjunction because when we're using the word but, because they are kind of opposites of each other. When the game is over, you kind of expect the crowd to leave. But in this situation, the crowd refused to leave. And then when we put in that coordinating conjunction, you need a comma. So let's take a look at the next slide where you're going to see some examples. These are 4 examples of sentences that have coordinating conjunctions. Some may need a comma and some may not. So if a sentence does not need a comma, I want you to put in brackets at the end of the sentence, no comma needed. Okay, coordinating conjunctions can also be used within a list, because basically with a list, you're combining 3 or more even independent clauses. I have 3 pets. I don't actually have any pets. I have 3 pets. I have a bird, comma, a dog, comma, and a cat, period. Those are technically 3 independent clauses. I have a bird, I have a cat, I have a dog, but I'm combining them into one sentence, so I need a comma. Okay, so like I said, if you need to pause the video in order to type out these sentences, you can do so. But I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. This is your next comma rule. Use commas after introductory clauses. This is something that students forget to do a lot. Phrases or words that come before the main clause. Common starter words for introductory clauses that should be followed by a comma are after, although, as, because, since, when, and while. For example, while I was eating, comma, the cat scratched at the door. The cat scratched at the door is an independent clause. While I was eating is a dependent clause. It cannot stand by itself. I was eating is independent, but you throw the word while in there and it's independent. And that's also an introductory clause, meaning I'm giving you a little bit of more background information about when this independent clause happened. And I need to mark that off with a comma. However, don't use commas after the main clause when a dependent clause follows it. So in this example, she was late for class because her alarm clock was broken. We do have the word that usually goes within an introductory clause, the word because. But since it is in the middle of the sentence, we're not going to use a comma there because it flows better. There is no pause. There's no natural pause in this sentence. She was late for class because her alarm clock was broken. However, if we were to invert this and say, because her alarm clock was broken, she was late for class, then we would need a comma. But because the big word because is in the middle of the sentence, it does not need a comma. So here's the practice 5 sentences that go with that rule. Oh, and I actually gave you the answer to that first one. There's an easy one, if you're paying attention to my example earlier. And again, remember, if there is no comma needed, you need to put it in brackets at the end of the sentence. Bracket, no comma needed, bracket. And there's at least one here that does not need a comma. Okay, moving forward, like I said, you may need to pause the video. Comma rule number 3, when do I use a comma? Use a pair of commas in the middle of a sentence to set off clauses, phrases, and words that are not essential to the meaning of the sentence. Use one comma before to indicate the beginning of the pause and one comma at the end to indicate the end of the pause. That Tuesday, which happens to be my birthday, is the only day that I am available to meet. Don't use commas to set off clauses that begin with the word that. So here, the comma is not setting off the clause that Tuesday. It's setting off the clause which happens to be my birthday. So to remove that Tuesday is the only day I am available to meet. That is a complete independent clause. Which happens to be my birthday is dependent. It is extra information. It's kind of an appositive. An appositive is extra information added into the middle of the sentence and has to be set off by commas because it's dependent. It's dependent. It cannot stand by itself. And I apologize, my cleaning lady is here today, so you might hear vacuuming upstairs. So here are the 3 sentences that go with that example, with that rule. Remember, your commas should be in brackets as well as your no comma needed. Okay. Comma rule number 4, I believe, is what we're up to. Maybe 5, I forgot. Use commas to separate 3 or more words, phrases, or clauses written in a series. You must always put a comma between the last 2 words in the series. Okay, this is called the Oxford comma. And some grammarians, those that study and teach grammar, some very silly grammarians, in my opinion, do not believe in the necessity of the Oxford comma. And the Oxford comma is the one that's right here after executive. The Constitution establishes the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. Some people would say that the comma right there after executive is unnecessary and excessive. However, having that comma there ensures no confusion. No confusion. Without it, there can be some very silly mistakes that occur. For example, in this sentence, establishes the legislative branches of government. And potentially someone could confuse that executive and judicial are the name of the same branch instead of 2 separate branches. So that Oxford comma there, that second comma before the and, ensures that list item number 2 and 3 are separate items and not the same thing. Okay, so be very careful. I am a stickler for the Oxford comma. I had a professor in college who told me not to use it, and I lost respect for him right then and there. Okay, he just was a very simplistic writer, and he did not appreciate commas in their full glory. That was the only reason I lost respect for him. I had other issues with him. He had no respect for the mental health of students. But anyways, moving on. So here are the examples. Okay, pause if you need to. Moving on. Okay, so this one's a little bit long, so make sure you're tagging along with me. Use commas to separate 2 or more coordinate adjectives that describe the same noun. Be sure to never add an extra comma between the final adjective and the noun itself, or to use commas with non-coordinate adjectives. Coordinate adjectives are adjectives with equal, co-ordinate status in describing the noun. Neither adjective is subordinate to the other. You can decide if 2 adjectives in a row are coordinating by asking the following questions. Does the sentence make sense if the adjectives are written in reverse order? Does the sentence make sense if the adjectives are written with and between them? If your answer is yes to these questions, then the adjectives are coordinate and should be separated by a comma. For example, he was a difficult, stubborn child. coordinate. I have a few of those. They lived in a white frame house. Okay. Now let's look at the first one where it definitely has coordinate adjectives. The two coordinate, I have trouble with that word, too many O sounds. Difficult and stubborn. Those are two adjectives that are being used to describe the child. So if we test it with the rule, if they can be switched, if you could say stubborn, difficult child, and you can also add an and in between instead of a comma, he was a difficult and stubborn child. Since both of those occur and both of those, can happen without changing the meaning of the sentence, that means that these adjectives are coordinates and you can use a comma. However, in that next sentence, we have two adjectives, the word white and the word frame. They lived in a white frame house. Because you cannot really switch the order of these two adjectives, and you really can't put a word in between it. You can't put and in between it. They lived in a frame white house. They lived in a white and frame house. It doesn't make a ton of sense. A frame house is a house that's built out of wood. Like kind of a lot of country homes are frame houses, and you don't see that much in the city. But a lot of country homes are frame houses. So it is describing the color and what it's made of. Now, in this situation, the color is actually less important than what the house is made of. So these are non-coordinate adjectives. They're not equal. So you cannot change the order. In the English language, typically we put the least important adjective first, and we tend to do this naturally. We don't even notice that we do it. Okay? For example, describe somebody's hair. You don't typically say brown short hair. You typically say short brown hair. Okay, so that kind of means that when we identify somebody, the first thing that we're going to look for is the color of their hair and then the length of it. Short brown hair. So by putting the word short, that means that it's the least important of those two adjectives. I'm not sure if that makes sense. That maybe it makes sense mostly in my mind, but I've never really heard anybody describe length first and then color. Color first and then length, because the color is the more important one. Okay, you have 6 people in a room. If you're looking for the person with the short brown hair, you're going to eliminate all of the people with the blonde hair and the red hair first and go to the brown. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. So here are the examples that go with it. Remember, you need to test for coordinate adjectives. So 2 examples there. Moving on. Use commas to set off all geographical names, items, and dates except the month and day, addresses except the street name and number, and the titles in names. For example, Birmingham, Alabama gets its name from Birmingham, England. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this rule. There's no example there. There's no practice on that one. Use a comma to shift between the main discourse and a quotation. John said, without emotion, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, this is something that was discussed also in our quote integration class just a couple of weeks ago, recently. So when you introduce a quote, typically you're going to put a comma, especially if you use the word said somewhere in that phrase. Okay, if you can access this, I'm not going to actually go there now, but that is a great website that contains a lot of quizzes and practice exercises, as well as all of the comma rules. So if you have trouble with commas, especially a particular type of rule, you can go to that website and kind of play around with that. Okay, I'm going to keep this short, especially since I've got a lot of noise going on upstairs. But if you have any questions about any of those comma rules, be sure to let me know. So as I said, there is 1 point per correct question available for all of those practice questions. And yes, I know some of the rules didn't have any, but it definitely totaled pretty close to 10. I didn't count them, but I think they maybe totaled more than 10. So lucky you. When you send me the email, please do not text me. Send me an email with all of the answers, the question, the sentences, commas where they need to be, and if there are no commas necessary, make sure that they're at the end of the sentence, you write bracket, no comma needed, bracket, and you must tell me where you want the points. I will give you as many points as you earn for each correct answer. And so if you got 9 out of 10 correct, I'll give you 9 points on wherever you choose to put it. So I'm waiting for Iris to ask her question, and I'm going to leave that in the recording in case anyone else has the same question. Nope, she doesn't have a question. Okay, so be sure to send me an email with your answers. And if you have any questions about commas, be sure to let me know because it's something I'm pretty sticky about. I used to be really bad at commas, really bad at commas. And it's something that I learned very naturally. And I'm much, much, much better at them now, even though I may not always be able to tell you why. So if you are really uncomfortable with comma rules and they just really confuse you, the best way to learn how to use commas is just start by putting them in naturally where you would pause when you read a sentence. So example, if I read a sentence that has a list, I have a cat, dog, and bird, naturally you would say, I have a cat, a dog, and a bird. And so therefore you would put 2 commas into that sentence because you paused naturally twice. So that's a good way to start. Eventually, if you are able to master that, you may actually be able to go backward and then learn the rules and why you put them where you put them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and then I'll wait for Iris's question.